my end so I can see what the quality looks like and what's going on there. So just give me a second on that, and I'll get to you guys and help it out real quick. Channel, and that's it. Cool. All right. So for those of you that are watching this after the fact, good afternoon, good morning, good whenever you watch this. This is a video specifically for my AP World History students, in which I'm going to be going over some of their DBQ responses from last week and giving them some feedback on it. And those students' names will be specifically mentioned in any of these assignments. If they participate in the chat, I'll talk to them directly, but any of the assignments I won't mention whose or whose, so don't worry about that. If you're watching this fact, someone's going to see my work. It's like they might see your work, but they won't know it's yours, so don't freak out. This is mostly just to give them the one thing that I can't really give them by assigning videos, and that is actual feedback on their work. The primary thing here is there's a lot of really good content out there for WAP on YouTube. Lots of good people who make really high quality videos that explain the concepts as good, if not better than I could, and stuff like that. So I'll assign those videos, but for the one thing that you can't really replace, which is me being able to see your work and tell you what specifically you need to work on, that's what this video is for. For those of you watching this after the fact, I think I'll be able to pull these off every Monday. I do econ stuff Tuesday through Friday because I'm like the curriculum writer for econ, so like have a ton of responsibilities when it comes to econ for the district, whereas for WAP, it's my first year teaching it. I'm not on the curriculum writing team. I don't have a lot of responsibilities for WAP, and I can assign you guys, frankly, a lot of things that would make up for me not being able to teach you it. But this is a thing that I can't really make up for. So I'll be trying to deliver feedback like this for you guys every single week as best I can. If you specifically want me to look at your DBQ or your response, please email me or put something in the discussion board onto Moodle so that I can see that you want me to go over yours specifically and just give you specific feedback, because I'll do that. But this is a video where I can break down, like, okay, what score would you have gotten? What points would you get? What do you need to work on? What things are issues here? There's going to be some things that are very specific problems where it is, okay, this person just misread this document. That's a classic mistake that happens sometimes. Sometimes you just misread the title or who wrote it, and then you lose some points on your essay because you wrote the wrong thing because you read it wrong. That happens. So yeah, that's a thing that, like, it sucks. You got to be careful, but it happens. So don't get too messed up on that. Vonnie, what's up? You're in the wrong place though. Vonnie, this is not for econ. This is a WAP thing. You're good, but I'm doing econ stuff Tuesday through Friday is when I do econ. So this one's for my WAP kids, my sophomores. I appreciate you tuning in and being so right on the nose with checking your YouTube subscriber stuff, but this isn't for econ, so you're good. Tomorrow, Vonnie, I'm going to review money market, loanable funds market, and bank balance sheets for second semester kids. Or first semester kids, and then I'm doing loanable funds market on Wednesday and government debt and deficit on Thursday. So that's what you need to be aware of for econ. Thanks for checking though. This is just a thing for the WAP kids where I'm going to go over some DBQs that they wrote. So I don't know if you want to look at a DBQ ever again, Vonnie, so I'd probably hop out. But thanks for tuning in. So yeah, I'm going to be going over some stuff, explaining what the grading guidelines look like this year for the DBQs. Hopefully you all watched the video that I assigned on how they're grading DBQs this year, how it's a little different than a normal year for DBQs, and what that rubric is. I'm going to mention it today and talk about it today as I score some of these so you can see, like, oh, that's what they'd be doing. And I'm going to try and, like, demo, basically, how your DBQ on AP exam day will be scored. So careful for that. Make sure that you're paying attention to that kind of thing. And again, if you want me to go over yours specifically, let me know so that I can help you out there and check everything. But yeah, I'll be doing that shortly here once we get to 2 o'clock on my end. Again, this is a live stream recording, so if you're watching this after the fact, remember that I was doing this live. So there's like sometimes there's commenters that show up that are my students that'll mention things. So if you get thrown off, just check the comments, you'll see it. And then I'll start up in a couple minutes. In the meantime, where's my dog? Archer! Archer! Where are you at? Oh, I can hear him. There he is. Give you guys some Archer cam. Oh god, let me space out my monitors. Apologies, there's 2 screens on my computer. There he is. Whoa. There's the dog. No one's in the live chat right now, that's fine. I don't really expect to see that many of you, if any of you, live with this, because I only sent out the link to this thing like 2 hours ago. Wasn't planning on necessarily doing this as a live stream, but once I was like, well, I'm going to record it, might as well do it live, just in case any of you want to participate. So if you're wondering, like, I didn't see the link until like Monday at 11, it's like, yeah, I didn't send it out until then because I wasn't planning on doing a live stream of it until I was like, you know what, why the hell not, in case any of you can show up to it and ask me questions. Worst case scenario, it's the exact same as if I would have recorded it, and it won't take me any more time than if I normally recorded it outside of this, like, 5-10 minute window I have at the start, just to make sure that, like, everything works smoothly. I start my streams up, like, 5-10 minutes before I normally would go live so that I can make sure that everything's working on a tech end from, like, my mic standpoint, my video standpoint, my overlays and everything, that they're all working properly and that nothing weird is happening on that end. So I know that this is all good. So once it gets to 2 o'clock on my end, I'll start acting basically as if everyone's here who's going to be here, which could be 0. That would be fine. That's not crazy for a video where you guys got like a 2-hour heads up on it. That would be fine. So let me make sure that I've got everything on my end that I need. Yes. I will talk about the thesis formula that was mentioned in the DBQ video, something that we haven't talked about. It does exist. It's out there. If you ever Googled how to write a thesis for WAP, you probably would have come across this. I'll mention why I don't really teach it, but it's okay. It's just not something that makes a lot of sense, like, long term. Going into college, you shouldn't really use it. That's why I don't teach it, but I'll go into that. Okay, it's 2 o'clock on my end, so I'm going to start going through stuff. The idea mainly being, okay, well, here is our DBQ. It says evaluate the extent to which women exercised power and influence within various societies in Afro-Eurasia during the period of 1200 to 1450. Okay. Basically, you have to tell in your thesis how much did women exercise power and influence within various societies in this part of the world, Afro-Eurasia, which is really all of Africa, Europe, and Asia. So basically everywhere but the Americas and Australia. So good news is most of what we cover is in this window. During the period of 1200 to 1450, so it has to be in that window for it to make sense for your thesis or for your argument. You've got to tell them how much power and influence do women extend in this time period, the extent to which. So you can say that compared to previous time periods, their power grew. You can compare different places in this window, saying, hey, in some parts of Afro-Eurasia, they had heavy influence of power and influence when it came to political power or military power, whereas in other parts of Afro-Eurasia, they had very limited social influence of power, or very limited power when it's compared to the men's typical amount of power. Like, there's a bunch of ways to answer it. You've just got to be careful that you're making sure that your answer is tied to the idea of how much power and influence were they exercising in their society in this time period. You're not specifically telling them why that's the case. To be clear, you don't have to go down like a rabbit hole of, well, women have been historically looked down upon because of like gender imbalance and like blah blah blah. It's like, that's not what the essay is asking about. The essay is just asking you to tell them, okay, how much power and influence do women specifically actually influence in this window? You don't have to tell them why women in general have had a rough go of it. Like, that's not what the prompt is. So careful with that. Some people tend to read too much into the prompts. But be careful. It's like a various studies. That means they want you to touch on more than one place. So don't just talk about the Mongols. Don't just talk about China. Don't just talk about France. Like, talk about multiple places, multiple societies in this region, in this window. Those are your classic, like, footfalls. We've got some documents here. Brief, quick overview of each document. We've got Allah ad-Din Juvaini. I'm terrible at names when it comes to different places, so forgive me on pronunciation. But this person, I'm just going to call him Juvaini. Juvaini wrote a book, which was the history of the world conqueror. It's a history of kind of obviously Genghis Khan. And in this portion that they cut out, it's about Sorkotani Beki, which I'm just going to call her Becky because it's easier, who's Genghis Khan's daughter-in-law who ended up taking power. Basic idea here is, okay, Becky takes power with her sons a little bit, can lead the army, that's good. She does mostly a fine job. The biggest thing, the second paragraph, is very religiously tolerant. She was a Christian and a practicing Christian, but was very cool with Muslims and Islam. In fact, donated for a college. Cool, got it. General positive overview, things to mention off this document. If you're taking notes off to the side, it'll be like, okay, power. Yes, I know my handwriting is terrible. Oh, you can't even see that. Let's just pray that you can't see. I wrote the word power over here. Power, okay. Religion. I'm also doing this with like a pen, which is just my mouse, so that's going to be like literally terrible. So don't worry about that. I just be like quick little skim things like, okay, this is power going up. This is an increase in power document, right? If we talk about the extent of power, I would say like, okay, power is going up here. It's based around religion and also political. And then military also a little bit. So like what I'm doing over here is I'm basically jotting down, okay, for an argument that I might do, what would I say in terms of, is this like 4, is this more power, less power, like to what extent they asked? Okay, well, to what extent? This is an example of improved power, so I wrote power off to the side because I'm like, this is more power. And then I wrote effectively what groups I might put this document in. And again, this is real. If I was you guys, I'd be writing like crazy shorthand. Like R is religion, P is political, M is military, just off to the side really quickly. Because again, time is a constraint here. You want to do this fast. So I'm like skimming it. I'm like, okay, this seems like more power. It's religion is mentioned. It's religious in nature, political a little bit because she takes over control. Military is part of it too. Cool, moving on, next document. You want to kind of fly through the documents like that, where you're just like, okay, I know that this is a in favor of power standpoint. I know this is more religion, political, military standpoint, and I move on to the next one. And then you go to the next one. Document 2 is from Ibn Battuta, who's like a super famous traveler, went across Africa. This is from one of his books. This is going to the court of Mansa Musa. Cool, you know who that is. That's a good one. You're like, okay, cool, I see Mansa Musa, so this is in the court of Mansa Musa. Here we go. Then you get a document that is largely very confusing to read because it's written in a way that most people don't understand. Basically is that people there doesn't understand them. Ibn Battuta doesn't get it. Fine. They are mostly tying their genealogy from their maternal uncle, which is their mom's brother. Interesting. Man doesn't pass his inheritance to the sons of his sister. Interesting. That's, you're like, okay, that's kind of different. Women do not veil themselves. So even though they are practicing Muslims, they don't cover themselves in veils. Okay. That's a little more social freedom than they're used to. He wishes to marry among them can marry, but the women do not travel with the husband. Okay, that's a different restriction. Or at least they're not required to travel with the husband, so this could be a positive. Not sure off the document. It could be a negative or a positive. And if one of them wanted to do that, it should be prevented by the family. Okay, there's the negative. So she's not allowed to go with the husband places. The women there have friends and companions amongst men outside the prohibited degrees of marriage, meaning the women have friends who aren't directly related to them that are men, which is not normal in a lot of places in this time period. Ditto for men who are friends who are women, who, again, so this is it seems like, okay, socially a little more pliable. This could be bad, because again, they mentioned okay, this could be, non-approval conduct, but women do have friends who are men, and men do have friends who are women. Okay, so this is a document that is kind of hard to use. And I would mention that often. Like when I'm taking notes, I'm like, I don't love this document. Because 1, it's kind of complicated. 2, it's hard to understand. So if you just don't understand what a document is, you probably shouldn't use it because you have to summarize it. So if you can't summarize it, then I sure as hell wouldn't use it. So this one, I'd be like, probably no. Probably no. This one is maybe more social power because they can have friends, but also you could argue that less social power because they can't travel with their husband places and would be prevented by their family from doing so, and that conduct would be disapproved of, but maybe more power because some finances pass through the mother's side as opposed to the father's side. That's interesting, and women don't have to have veils on them, so there's some ways where culturally it's more accepting, in some ways it's not. So it's tricky. It's a complicated one. There's nuance here. I'd probably avoid it because of that. Document 3, Empress Zhu, third wife of the Ming Emperor Yongle. Excerpt from Instructions for the Inner Quarters. So it's written by the Empress. Okay. It's from a book called Instructions for the Inner Quarters, which again, when you read that, you should be like, okay, what does that mean? Instructions, got it. I know that. I know what instructions are. Just hey, do this. For the inner quarters, okay, that could be inner quarters of my house. So for my servants. It could be inner quarters for society, for houses in general. It could be for my house, could be for anyone's house. So this is either rules for her family to abide by, or for families to abide by. We'd probably figure it out based on the context. Being upright and modest, reserved and quiet, blah, 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 blah. Okay, this is all talking about, typical Chinese role of women, right? This is, if you're thinking, historically, How did the Chinese typically have women viewed, and what was their general role? Okay, well, a lot of the times it was subservient to men, loyal to men, be dignified, kind of quiet. And this is coming from the top. This is coming from the empress. This is like the head honcho, the most powerful woman in the country, is telling to every other woman, hey, you should do this. Of old upright women order their feelings nature based on more principle. Blah, 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 blah. So some things that are mentioned here. Therefore, they are able to complement their husbands in fulfilling the teachings of the way. Okay, well, that just means that they work in tandem with the husbands. That's, okay, that could be a more powerful thing you could say. Because it's mentioning here as well, the wife is one who follows her husband. Okay, that's less power, but the way of the husband and the wife principle of the strong and the weak. The prosperity or decline of the family, the fall of the rise or state are to be linked to this. So this last line is kind of the, if you were going to go down the, oh, that's a huge circle. Give me 1 second on that. If you're going to go down the rabbit hole of like this one could be used as like a more power for women standpoint, or at least more of a responsibility for women standpoint, this last line would be really useful. What you're saying is that the dynamic of husband and wife is inherently tied to the rise and the fall of the state. If the families are weak, if they don't work well together, then the state, the country, the nation will fall apart. So you could maybe tie that in. Generally speaking, a majority of this document is telling us that women are subservient to men in that respect. So if you're going pro, you got to be really careful with this document. If you're going that women were in a lot of ways withheld socially, didn't have a lot of freedom, couldn't do a lot of things from like a culture or personality standpoint, then this would be a great document to use. But it depends on what your argument is. Some documents work better for different arguments. This one would work great if you're going like women in a lot of ways were constrained in this time period power-wise. This one would be an example of that. You could also say the empress is writing this document. This was a power play by the empress. The empress was dictating to everyone else how to do things. So you could say because it's instructions from the empress, and because these could be largely followed, that shows how much power and influence the empress had in dictating social norms. So there's like a lot of ways you could take this. Document 4 is a painting. There's almost always going to be a painting or a picture of some kind on your DBQ this year. They mentioned that already. There's going to be some visual thing. Drawing of Tome Gozen, a 12th century female samurai, cool, known for her bravery, archery skills, and horsemanship during the Genpei War in Japan. And this was drawn in the 1700s. Okay, so its time period is the right time period. It's in the early 1200s, so it still works, but the drawing itself was made way later. Fine. Female samurai, cool. Female military power, cool. This is a plus in the power play thing because she's known for her bravery, archery skills, and horsemanship. It's very nice that they said that in the description of the document. That's something they don't always do, but if they have a drawing, read the hell out of the source because you might find out more from the source than you do from the painting. But she does look like a woman who has a friggin' long spear and a horse and is in full regalia, like full samurai gear. So, in general, you would say more powerful women here, more influence for women. Yeah, military standpoint. If women are allowed to be samurai, that's a very well-respected position within Japanese military. Okay, that's a positive play. And document 5 is Joan of Arc. If you know anything about Joan of Arc, you can already tell this would be a more powerful standpoint. They give us a nice little description of Joan of Arc in case we didn't cover it, which we didn't. So it's nice that they did that. Called the Maid, that's her nickname. Young girl from the time of Don Remy. To be clear, when we say young here, she was like in the peak of her power from age 14 and died at age 19. It's like when we say she was young, it means like she was leading this war at like y'all's age. At like age of 16, 17 was when she was like peak Joan of Arcness. So young is what we're saying here. So basically this is just the King of England needs to recuse himself and give the land back to the French people. That's the idea. If you don't do these things, I, as the military commander of France, will murder the hell out of all of your dudes, kick you out of France, and basically go nuts. It's a threat. This is a threat. This is not even really a negotiation. This is leave or else is the idea here. So pro woman power here, definitely. For a woman to be in military control of France, or at least control over some part of the French military, that is a lot of power being exercised by a woman. Yes, that would work. That's a great example of it from a military standpoint. So documents 4 and 5 do give you a very good pro-military standpoint of women's influence in this time period. Like women in multiple parts of the world had strong military influence, like in Japan where they could play the role of samurai, or in France where Joan of Arc, as an example, led the French military during the Hundred Years' War, or led part of the French military during the 100 Years' War. Yep, those work. So that's my quick little document thing. How much time did that take for me to do? That took me about 10 minutes, looking at the clock. That was me reading it and going through each of the documents and sort of talking my way through each of the documents. And that was me going slower because I was like doing it for y'all, right? Like I was slowing down my thought process while I was reading over these. So that's what you should do for the first like 5 to 10 minutes of the DBQ is read the documents, read the prompt, analyze them, and go. So read the prompt. Okay, women exercise power, extent to which women exercise power influence. So okay, you need to tell them what's the extent. Various societies got to hit on more than one place. In this area, good, it would have to be this area, which is to say like most of the world during this time period. Okay, cool. That's what we learned about that time period was that region, so we're fine. Each document, quick note, is this a pro or an anti? Is this more extent, less extent? What type of extent? That kind of thing. Because I want to be able to, at the end of reading my DBQ, I want to already have a good idea for my thesis. I want to have my documents basically grouped already and just be ready to go. So after reading the documents, I know what my thesis is going to be. My thesis is going to say that within many societies, the power and influence of women grew during this time period when it came to military strength and or political responsibility. Military strength in places like Japan and France, where women were either members of the military in Japan as samurai, or were able to lead the military like Joan of Arc in France, and expanded their political role in places like the Mongol Khanate, which is the Mongolian Empire, as well as in China. Because even though she's saying things that are like, diminishing the role of women in a social standpoint, she is the empress and making this sort of declaration. It wasn't like the emperor told women to do this, the empress told women to do this. So I could use that. I am not using document 2 here because it's a little too tricky for me. As like, if I'm trying to do this quickly, I mean, I could probably, if I had like another 5 minutes, read through this a couple more times and try and piece together a way to use it, but I don't want to waste time here. Like 2, I'm like, nope, I'm out on 2. 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 5 I can use. I get what those documents say. I can summarize those documents. I can analyze those documents a little bit. I can use those documents. I know what I'm doing with those. So I said expanded power in those 2 places. That's 2 groups. If I wanted to say expanded military power, however, were limited in their social influence or their social role were still limited in this time period, I could still do documents 4 and 5 for expanded military power and then use either document 2 or document 3 for the limited social power of women, right? Like women couldn't leave without their husbands, they'd be prevented by their family. I could use that. Or I could use the fact that most of this document is outlining rules for women to follow. So these would all work as examples. So that's, again, the first 10 minutes of your DBQ. Go through the documents, read through the documents, and then just see, okay, how can I use each of these? What would be a good way to set it up? That's before I've even done anything. I haven't to be clear, for you showing this, if you're showing up to this now, I haven't graded anyone's DBQ yet. I just did what I would have done if I were you guys and opening a DBQ for the first time. So if you want to go back and watch this later, you obviously can. This video will be uploaded on my Moodle, and it'll be uploaded here on this YouTube channel where you can just rewind it and go back and watch what I was doing before. So, the rubric. Before I get into the actual DBQs themselves, let's talk about the rubric this year. The rubric this year is a little different. They changed some things because they wanted to make this more doable remotely and in a shorter window of time. Big thing, only 5 documents, not 7. Only 4 of the documents will have text, and those 4 should have shorter text than our normal DBQs could possibly have. So that's good. The biggest difference is time. You've got 45 minutes for the DBQ. That is such a small amount of time for a DBQ. Even with just 5 documents, that is a freaking tiny amount of time. So you have to be very careful about using that time wisely and on things that you think you can get points for. To be clear, the way the AP exam is graded, it's graded on basically a bell curve, meaning the higher the overall scores are, the harder it is to get points. The lower the overall scores are, the easier it is to get a passing grade. So If we're all thinking that students won't finish this DBQ in that time period, that's actually fine. Your grade won't suffer from that standpoint. Because if everyone isn't able to finish the DBQ, then the threshold for passing will be lower than normal. So it ain't the end of the world if a lot of people don't finish it. Just try to make sure that you can get as much done as possible. That way, your score is maximized under these conditions. Thesis is the same as it always would be. The thesis wasn't going to get changed at all. The thesis point is exactly the same as it normally would have been, which is make your claim, answer the question, and be specific. Be specific. You can't just tell me they had more military power. What do you mean by that? And when I say, like, being able to work as samurai in Japan, that is more specific. Or when you say they had more political power, such as the ability to push for more religious tolerance in the Mongol Khanate, that is more specific example. Like, you need to be specific in your thesis so that if you just gave me your thesis as the answer to the question on its own, it would stand. Your thesis should be able to stand on its own. You shouldn't need the rest of the paper for your thesis to make sense. Your thesis should make sense if it was removed from your paper entirely, if you just had that as the answer and you wanted to save time, that would work. So it needs to be specific so that it would actually answer. You can't just be like, well, it had more like military power and stuff. It's like, well, if I'm a person, I'd be like, well, like what, man? Like that doesn't, like, what do you mean? I need more juice to that. Contextualization is also the same as it normally would be, because they could give you points for not a lot on contextualization. You just got to tell them what's happening in that time period prior to the document. So for this one, if it's 1200 to 1450, if you can give them some context from like 900 to 1200, which frankly isn't tested material, which is interesting. Like, a lot of times doing context on that early of a time period is tricky, because the AP exam doesn't cover stuff from prior to 1200, so you can kind of reach for anything. For this would be stuff like the Silk Road, the emergence of the Mongolian Empire, the role of women in China. You really want to talk about the role of women. Your context has to be connected to your argument, so it has to make sense based on the prompt. You can't have context that's just like random information. You can't just be like, there were the Greeks and the Persians and the Romans, and then there was Asia. Like, that's not context, because none of that has to do with the role of women. So you want to be talking about, like, okay, in Song Dynasty China, blah, 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 blah. Mongolian Empire is initially led by the Khans, including Genghis, were progressively a little more and more favorable of women being involved, including in actual military fighting, stuff like that. Like, you want to give them, like, okay, here's relevant background information. You typically want to use, like, 2 or 3 vocabulary words, generally, in that window. This is one of the big parts that's changed. The evidence portion. This is the, like, okay, I'm in the means of my body paragraphs. What do I need to do? Okay, need to talk about 2 documents. You've got to summarize 2 of the documents. That part should not be a problem for you guys. That first point right there should be very easy to get. Summarize 2 documents. And support an argument for 2 of those documents. That is, okay, what is your evidence from your document? What is your argument for the paper? Connect those 2. How does that evidence support your actual answer? How do you get from point A to point B? How did the women being able to become samurai tell us that the power of women and influence expanded in the time period? Well, because they were able to take the role of samurai, which was a much honored and revered position in Japan, it showed that, at least from a strength standpoint, men viewed women as equal, or at least equal enough that in circumstances, women could gain that power and that role of samurai, which would then let them exercise that power and gain some level of respect. That's explaining it. That's telling me, okay, so that's how women gain power. How that samurai thing meant that they gained power. Like, that tells me, okay, cool. Not just because they were samurai, it's because of what being a samurai means. Okay, and then supports an argument in response for using 4 documents. So it's 1 point for 2, just saying what's in 2. 2 points for 2 if you say what's in the document and then use that document to support your argument. And then the third point is if you do that same thing that you did for the first 2 points for 2 more documents, for a total of 4 documents, you evidence and support it. This is a hard point to get, simply because of time. Like, these 2 you should go for. You should go for the context, you should go for the thesis, because these are points you could get in 2 or 3 lines of text, realistically. You can get context points in like 3 sentences if you do a good enough job, if you give vocabulary. you could get these points. You should get these points. If you're reading your documents properly, these 2 points should be very doable for you. This one is tough because time-wise, doing 4 documents in that window is kind of tricky. Evidence beyond the documents just means you've got to use specific evidence towards your argument that's outside the actual evidence listed in the documents. So if it's talking about the Joan of Arc in France, then you can talk about something else in France, but you can't talk about Joan of Arc. You've got to bring in other information. It does need to be relevant to your argument. It does need to be accurate. It doesn't have to be like completely aligned to your specifics. So if you're saying, like mine was where it was like political and military, you could say like, additionally, in this time period, blah, 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 and it's evidence outside the documents that either supports or goes against your argument, depending on if you're letting it support or go against your argument. And then the second point is doing a second piece of evidence that is also outside the document. So if you do 2 pieces of evidence outside the documents, that's 2 points. These are also doable because you could also do these in like 2 or 3 lines. These are also things that could be short. Analysis and reasoning, this is just HIP. If you HIP 2 documents, you get 2 points. And by HIP, I mean do one of the 4 HIP skills. If you do one of the 4 HIP skills for 2 documents, then you get 2 points, as long as you do it properly. Go for this. This is also doable. So this point, these 2 points, doable. These 2 points, doable. These 2 points, doable. These 2 points, doable. The last point, which is for complexity, is not doable. I mean, one, in that video I linked to you guys for last week, he mentioned only 2% of students even get the complexity point. That's on a normal exam with normal amount of time. There ain't enough time for y'all to get a complexity point on this. There's just not. Like, if you're able to fit that in 45 minutes, I would be amazed. That would be crazy. It's just not worth it. So you should be aiming for 8. Maximum of 8 points for most of you, which would be both HIP points, both evidence beyond the document points, 2 of the 3 evidence points, basically just using 2 documents, evidencing 2 documents, and then giving those 2 documents support as well, explaining how those documents relate back to your prompt. Context, thesis. Now, again, I would, in going for these 2 as well as these 2, I would actually use 3 documents because it gives you a safety net. If you botch one of these or this, you could have got it right on the 3rd attempt. And if you hit 3 documents, then maybe your point of view is wrong on one of your other 2, but then for the other 2, you did it right, so there's the 2 points. So for me, if I'm you guys, if I'm trying to do this in a realistic amount of time with the best chance of getting 8 out of 10 points, because that's a reasonable amount of points to go for as like a goal for kind of everybody. But even if you're the high-end students, I wouldn't really be trying to go for more than 8. There's just not enough time. What I would be doing is context and thesis and try to keep that to like taking less than 10 minutes. Because again, you should be thinking of your thesis while you are doing the rest of your thing. While you're doing your documents, you should be thinking of your thesis. So that shouldn't take you very long. The context might, but the thesis shouldn't. So you do 5 to 10 minutes, that's your thesis and context. You nail those out. That's your first chunk. Your second and third chunk are your body paragraphs, and that could be simply just 3 documents, would be my recommendation. You do 3 documents, you summarize the document, you HIP the document, pick one of the 4 HIP skills and use it with that document, purpose, point of view, historical context, or intended audience. Gio, good to see you. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it. I haven't gotten to grading any of them yet, Gio. I'm just explaining like the rubric. And Casey, good to see you too. Good to see everybody. But I haven't gotten to grading any of the things yet. I'm just explaining the general thought process of there it is, of the grading and the if I was writing a DBQ, what I would do. So again, thesis and context like always, and then probably 2, maybe 3 body paragraphs where I go into 3 documents where I summarize the document. Oh my god, my brain's exploding now. HIP the document, and then I connect that document to my thesis. Each of those steps would probably be maybe 5 sentences. Maybe 4 or 5 sentences would be, for each document, it should be like 4 to 5 sentences at least of doing that. Conclusion, no. You're not going to have time. A lot of you guys were doing this. I was seeing where you guys were ending. You like just ended the body paragraph. You're like, time's up. Yeah, there's no way conclusion is happening on this. So that's the way to get 8 points. To give you a safe chance. Now again, if you're timing yourself and there's no way in hell you can do 3 documents, then just do 2 and make sure you do them right. I'm saying do the 3rd document because it gives you a safety net. It covers your butt. In case you mess up one of the other documents, which we're going to go through some of these ones and grade them, and I'm going to tell you, like, a lot of people did mess up one of the documents. A lot of documents people misread or misuse. Like, you do want to give yourself that safety net if you can. But you do context and thesis, body. If you can fit a 3rd body paragraph where you get a 3rd document in, great. And then you're good. But you got to make sure your thesis is on point. Your thesis is the most important part. It has to be good. You got to crush it. And I'm going to talk about the thesis formula now. So, this is the thesis formula as given by the video I assigned last week. It is also the thesis formula courtesy of a guy named John Irish. John Irish is actually the APUSH teacher over at Southlake. Like, literally our Southlake. And he's, like, nationally recognized for creating this thesis formula. Now, I hate it. I actually hate this formula. From, like, a person who took college history classes, you really can't use this. This doesn't make any sense. It's really decent for AP classes because it can help you set up getting a complexity point, which I mentioned already I wouldn't even be going for here. So that's why I don't really advocate you using this. But if you wanted to, you could. Let me explain it in case, because I saw some people who like really kind of botched it. They tried to use it and just had no idea what to do with it on the DBQ prompt this week. It says, although X, because A and B, therefore Y. Y is your answer. You're ending with what your actual thesis statement is, which is, for me, was saying that women had expanded the extent to which power, influence had spread through women was largely increased during this time period, at least in both a military and political aspect. So that was my argument. Although X would be a counter-argument, and in this case you could actually do this reasonably well here. There's a solid counter-argument to this, which is saying, although largely social roles of women were held in the same aspect of being inferior to men and having much less responsibility than men when it came to like jobs and office and stuff like that, and power. They were generally still limited because of specific examples of, in times of military crisis, women were allowed to participate in the military, or in certain cultures where they were just allowed to participate in the military regardless, as well as their ability to lead whenever they would take control, like with the examples of previously Empress Wu, which is prior to this time period, or Joan of Arc militarily, or Becky, which is the Mongol leader. Those would all work. It's just, you got to give them, this is where your specifics are, and then therefore why. Again, I don't love the formula. I wouldn't have used it. It does work. You can do it. And it's good for setting up complexity, because one of the parts of complexity is like providing a counter argument to your argument and then debunking it. But that's too much work and takes too much time. So if you wanted to write your thesis the way that we've always been writing your thesis in the class, because you've been doing that properly and it hasn't been that big of a problem for you, keep doing what you were doing. Don't make yourself do this. But if you need a formula, if you've got good math brain and you really like having like a template and like a reusable formula, sure, you can use this. Just make sure that you're doing it properly. So, I think I've covered all the things I need to cover before I start grading the FRQs, or the DBQs. If you're just now tuning in, do it. Feel free to go back in the video later and see what I was talking about at the beginning. But, let's start with this one. And again, you shouldn't be able to see anyone's name on any of these, because no one's put their name inside the document, which is great. Let me shrink my head so you can read it. Also, some people use the highlighter, which is good, but frankly, the blue one made it kind of hard to read after the fact. Let me transition that. So, blue was context, red was thesis, and this person just said, I don't care after that, which is fine. I could figure it out. So, women in history typically seem to have very little liberties. The ideal is exemplified by foot binding in China starting in the 10th century to keep women unable to exercise any rights. Women were tokens to be married off for money, or to stay at home and to have and raise children. However, during the Mongols' rule, women were seen to have many rights and opportunities, such as government and military positions. Okay, is this good? Is this good enough for context? It's good enough for context point. There are some things that I would change if I were someone writing this. There's some things that I personally don't like as a writer. But would it work? Probably. Because you give me specifics like the foot binding in China and then the Mongols as your transition point. Because I can tell that Mongol thing is like your transition into your thesis, and that is specific. And the foot binding in China is a great example of how women were being held back in these time periods. So that's great. I probably wouldn't have had this first sentence, or I would have changed this first sentence, because the essay isn't about all of history. It's about 1200 to 1450. It isn't asking, in the entire history of the world, did women have power? We're not asking that. So while that's like true, because this is true, so I wouldn't like take points off for you for putting it here. It's just, for me, I wouldn't have written that. I would have said prior to 1200, 1450, women had very, very, very little liberties, freedoms, and individual rights across the globe, in general. Now, again, you want to be like, here's the tricky part. You want to be specific, but also not specific sometimes. You want to be specific in your answers, but when you're making like statements in general about things, you don't want to be like too specific. You don't want to say like, this is the only time this has ever happened, because do you know that? Can you guarantee that it's the only time that it's ever happened? Because if you've got a grader who knows about another time that it happened, and you wrote it's the only time that happened, that grader has to grade you for accuracy, and you're not accurate. So you got to be very careful with that. This is fine, because I said the word typically, so you're good. This is fine. This ideal, I wouldn't use the word ideal there, but whatever. That seems fine, and this is all okay. So the context point, I've given the context point here. That's fine. Context point's totally okay, that ain't a big deal. Context point, let me do that, make sure my thing is smaller. Check for the context. Sure, that's fine. It's not great, but it would be okay. Although women before 1200, 1450 had very little power, because women started being allowed to hold military positions and have official government position, therefore women's power and influence in Afro-Eurasia increased. Okay, so this is where I say, like, the thesis formula, some of you guys don't really know how to use. This is a person who's trying to, like, force it. It's fine, it's not a terrible attempt. In fact, it actually is a thesis that I think would actually give you the point. It's just not, like, great. It doesn't sound good when you're reading it out loud. You're like, this seems kind of, it just sounds weak. Although women before 1240 had very little power, which is true, I wouldn't count that as a counterpoint. You'd already said this. Like, you'd already said it up here, so it doesn't make as much sense to already have that, but whatever, it's fine. Because women started being allowed to hold military positions, okay, that's specific. And have official government positions, okay, that's kind of specific. Like, these are getting there. They're a little specific. If you could say holding military positions such as the samurai in Japan, and government positions such as leader of the Khan, like a Khanate, leader of a Khanate, that, okay, like, that's better. Do these work? I mean, it's better than just saying military and political power, right? So I'd probably give this person the point. It is super close. So this is about as, like, general and non-specific you could be in a DBQ, and I'd be, like, kind of okay with it. Because it's better than just saying military and political power, right? You said because they're able to hold these positions in these respective organizations, that showed us that their power and influence have increased because they're actually able to hold them, which, okay, I mean, yeah, that's better. So, point for the thesis, yeah, again, these first 2 points I would say on this are fairly weak. Like, these aren't, I wouldn't, like, hold this thesis up in front of the class and be like, this is a good thesis. Like, nah, this is, like, just passable thesis. This is like, if I was giving it a letter grade, I'd give it a C on the thesis, which on the AP exam, you still just need to get the point for it, so it doesn't matter. Like, you take it. If that's what you can do, take it, but careful with that. And typically, if I end up grading yours and you're like, holy crap, he's destroying me, I am trying to be as critical as possible on this. I am not here to hurt your feelings. I'm just going to take it as critically as I can so that you can get the full breakdown of, like, what the graders are thinking. So, starting in the 15th century, women began to be encouraged to hold military positions. In document 4, a samurai woman is depicted and recognized for her brilliant archery skills, bravery, and horsemanship during the Genpei War in Japan. Okay, so that's your, oh my god, it keeps doing this thing where every time I switch off of it, it resets to massive size. So, in document 4, blah, 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 blah. Cool. So what I was highlighting there was their evidence. Is this accurate? Yeah. Sure. That works. Now, again, I probably wouldn't write the words in document 4. This is frowned upon on DBQs to write, like, in document 4, in document 1, in document 2, because when you write it, you have to realize that feels really stupid, writing it every single time, right? If I'm writing a DBQ and I write in document 1, in document 2, in document 3, I feel dumb. So I'm like, there has to be a better way to do it. And there is. The best way to do it is typically to say, like, if you're saying document 4, you would say, in Tome Gozen's drawing. Because, like, they know their documents. Like, the graders know the documents. If you just say, in Tome Gozen's drawing, they'll know, okay, you're talking about the art one. Or if you said, in the letter from Joan of Arc. Yeah, that's better. It's better than writing document 4 or document 2 or document 3. Okay, if you write the instructions for the inner quarters, that would also work. Like, don't be so, like, held to the in document 1, in document 2. That's not good. I wouldn't do that. Okay, this is still a point. This would still get you the point for your, well, not, doesn't get you the point, so you have to do it twice, but, like, your first point on it, okay, like your first thing, did you hit it on the document? Yes, you got one document down. The purpose is to recognize a female woman for her contribution for fighting in the war and show she was an amazing asset for Japan's military. I mean, amazing asset, I don't know, but show her for her contribution to fighting in the war? Yeah. That seems like it could be the purpose of it. That seems like an accurate portrayal of the purpose of it. Like, why did they make this drawing? Because it shows this. And then you put this part on the end here. It shows not only they're able to fight, they were exceptional at it. That's better. Like, having this second sentence here, which is kind of still explaining it, helps the purpose feel a little better. You want the purpose to be like, how, why, and how. Why did they do this, and how does it do it? Well, why? Because it wants to show them for fighting the war. How? Because they weren't just fighting at it. It mentions that they specifically were exceptional. Like, in the source line, in the ideal of it, it shows them that they're actually strong. The way that he draws it is that she is drawn no differently than a man would have been drawn, right? In fact, if I were just to ask you, hey, what do they draw here? You'd probably say a samurai, and you wouldn't have realized that it's a female samurai, right? Like, that's good. That's good in terms of, oh, he's making them look like equals. Yeah. Increase the power and influence, which they perform just as well under war circumstances. Yeah. So that's the attempt to connect them. And I would say probably it's a little weaker. I would say the overall writing in this specific essay is a little on the weak side. It's not terrible. Like, this person should still, like, this person can still take AP English. They'd actually probably benefit a lot from taking AP English next year. But it's more along the lines of, like, this is very, like, you take this word to be, like, way too insulting right now, but, like, basic. Like, this feels very, like, okay, this works. It gets the job done. Which on an AP exam is all you really need to do is, does this get the job done? Does it get it from point A to point B? Yeah, it works. But yeah, the writing quality itself is a little rudimentary, like basic. It's fine. It works. And frankly, it would get the point for most things so far. That exclamation point's a little weak, like notably weak. Because I might write more to that. Again, I would say, like, because she's dressed identically to how men would be dressed. She has the same weapon. There's no sign of her struggling in the picture or painting. She's drawn in the same art style as a man would be. It's not, like, made that she's supposed to look pretty. It's just showing her as a soldier. Like, it's good to be a little more detailed in that explanation. But it's still okay. Document 5 details Joan of Arc's. Again, I would say Joan of Arc's letter, whatever. Assistance to the French, well, it was just in the English 100-Year War. Okay, good to mention the 100 Years' War. Maybe we should make sure you capitalize things properly there, but that's fine. Okay. That's really small. That's not a lot for the actual evidence. Like, what is that document? Okay, this is really, really not much. Like, you wrote more for the picture than you did for the letter. And the letter has words in it. Like, you don't have to use the words, but, like, reference what's happening there. Be like, okay, in this letter, she is speaking to the King of England, telling him to either back off or that she's going to come at them with the full military might of France and try to kill them. Like, that would be fine. Like, be a little more specific. Like, what details? Like, give me a little more there. So I probably wouldn't give you the point for the thing there. Now, this person does more than 2 documents, so they should be okay. Then the answer is the King of England. Yes, it is. And how he's advised to do will let her render justice for his actions, or else the maid, which is her, will make his army flee and the country will have him killed. Okay. Yeah. That's the intended audience. And then how this shows women will increase their influence and power because the king was at the threat of a woman. Yeah, a woman was threatening the King of England. That's good. Women at the head of armies making demands of the king, which if denied, would be questions. Yeah, so here's what I mean. This is the person's like argument, connecting to the argument. This is, and that says showers, but that's a typo, I can tell. This is their evidence. This is their argument for why document 5 supports their argument, and then this is the argument for why document 4 does. And you can tell just by the length of it, the amount of detail, right? Like, that's a lot more. And what's more substantial, it's right. This would work. This is what I mean by, like, you can do a little better from like an English standpoint. This person has you can tell this person has the ability to write. So like, this person can do it. It's just a matter of, let's see if they can do it more consistently. But this is good. This is very good, actually. I would absolutely take this. Powerful and threatening. Like, it demands and the king, which if denied would be followed by violent repercussions. Very good word choice. Repercussions is great. Before the 15th century, when we're not allowed to hold government. Okay, so this is the kind of thing where I would be very careful. Like, I would not write this way. Because we're not allowed to hold government positions. Well, I mean, one, that ain't true. If you want to say, like, a queen or an empress is a government position, those have been held forever. Cleopatra was prior to this, too. Like, there's a lot of examples of females who were in charge of places. It's just, in this time period, was that more frequent, is your argument. Which you're saying, in this argument, they're saying that it is more frequent. Do not say they were not allowed to hold government positions. They did not frequently hold government positions, or it was very, very rare for women to hold government positions prior to this time period. That's fine. But when you say something like, we're not allowed to, you are speaking in absolutes. You're saying they weren't, they couldn't do it. It's like, well, they could. They just didn't very often. Can and can't are very specific versus did and did not. So you gotta be very careful with that. See, specifically, you say the only woman ever to do this was Empress Wu of the Tang Dynasty. She's not the only woman to have done it. Again, Cleopatra did it prior to all of this, like a while ago. Like, there have been like queens of other countries that are much smaller that we don't talk about that have done this. It's just, are they prominent? Not as prominent. Empress Wu would be a great pull, and this is what the attempt is, I think. This is a good person to attempt to do the evidence beyond the document stuff with. Someone's trying to do evidence beyond the documents. That's why they're pulling Empress Wu. But it has to be used in your argument, and at no point is this tied to the argument. Like, there is no connection between Empress Wu and your argument in this statement. Right, you're saying Empress Wu ruled in 7th century. Does that support your argument? Does that go against your argument? Have you said anything about it with regards to your argument? No. So that would not get you to the point for evidence beyond the document. It's not just having evidence beyond the document. It's using evidence beyond the document to support your argument. And this doesn't support your argument, so it wouldn't work. She's a person you could reference. You could absolutely use Empress Wu as someone to try to do the evidence beyond the document with, but you would want to use it like in conjunction with, in supporting this document, as opposed to here, what you've got is effectively a break. In that, fun fact, Empress Wu of the Tang Dynasty ruled in 690. And then during the Mongols, they do those like that kind of thing. So again, I wouldn't say in document 1, you would just say in the document where it explains Becky's thing. It was in power purposes to describe how she ruled generosity and benefaction. You don't have to use the word benefaction. I know it mentions it in the document, but don't use words you don't know. Like, don't use words that you don't know or aren't comfortable with. Because that feels just like you copied it. Also encouraged toleration of all religions because she was a believer of Jesus. That's not... So, like, because she was a believer in Jesus, but observed the faith of Muhammad, it's careful. I would have just said she also encouraged toleration of all religions. I would have been careful about that. Like, she's not necessarily religiously tolerant because she believes in Jesus. Remember, the Crusades are happening in the same time period. It's not like everyone who believes in Jesus is religiously tolerant, because they're not in this time period. It's actually kind of a surprise. That's why they're mentioning, like, even though she's a Christian, he's also religiously tolerant. Like, that was a surprising thing, that she was religiously tolerant, not like because she's Christian. It's like, no. Observe the faith of Muhammad. She didn't observe the faith of Muhammad, she respected the faith of Muhammad. That's what it was saying. She was, like, willing to help him out. So, like, shows how women's influence and power was increased because she had a lot of influence over her people. In what respects, in what regards? You do say, including a college being built in Bokhara. I don't know if that's influence over her people or if that's just power that she had. Like, influence versus power is kind of tricky. Like I would say, like as a Mongol leader, she was able to exercise her power to push for more religious toleration, as well as actively use that power to encourage more of those beliefs in other people, like by building a college out in Bukhara that's meant to improve religious tolerance. Another woman who's granted power. Yeah, you ran out of time here, you can tell. She was just trying to, like, this would work also. She's trying to get to the 4-document thing. That's fine if they're trying to do a 4-document thing. That's okay. But running out of time on that one. Yeah, so that one doesn't really work. But, they got there. So what would we score? How would I score this? Well, we've got a few things going in this person's favor. One, they did, albeit barely, get the point for these two things. Like I would say, like it's super. Like I'm being like very, very nice. The AP exam does do that sometimes, where they're like very generous. I would give them the point for. Did they properly describe 2 documents? Yeah, they did. The document 4, they did it, as well as this document, they kind of do. I mean, it's close. Frankly, yeah, you know what? No, I wouldn't. I probably wouldn't give them a point for accurately describing, because I don't think they do a good enough job describing each of the documents. They describe the first one pretty well. Document 5, they really don't describe it very much. This document 1, they also don't describe it very much. They sort of just give you like 5 words that tell me what the document is. I need more than that. I need more detail. The argument, they actually do the argument more than once. This argument was super good. That argument kind of works. The argument down there for document 1 was actually good, so I would give them the arguing point. So, oh my god, see, look, I just barely switched off of it. So for the evidence, no, but for the argument, yes, which is super rare to get like that one and not that one. It's really hard for that to happen, but whatever. Evidence beyond the documents, no, for either. E, B, D, there's 2 points there, which is new. Again, we have only been doing it with 1. There's actually 2 now. So evidence beyond the documents, no, they didn't get it, because they tried with Empress Wu, but it didn't really work. The hip, there are 2, and this person did it twice. The audience there was fine. Purpose up there was also fine, so they got the hit points for both. And then complexity, no, but they shouldn't go for it. So context, thesis, evidence, argument, evidence beyond the document, hip, and then complexity. Don't go for the complexity, it's not worth it. There's a 3rd point here for 4, which the person got to a 4th document, but frankly they didn't get the evidence point for 2, so they wouldn't have gotten the 4. This person got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I mean, you didn't listen to me. I mostly bashed this thing. I was mostly critical of this one, and it still gets 5 points out of 10, which a DBQ average this year, my bet would be for the average score on a DBQ this year should be like 3 points out of 10. So that's still probably above average in terms of performance. So be aware of that, be cognizant of it. That's how this kind of thing looks. Let me pull up another. Just give me 1 second to make sure that I don't pull up one that has a name on it. And then I pull up one that I think does a really good job. Or at least is a really good attempt. Yeah, this one's a good attempt. This is a really solid attempt. This person got a lot done in the time period, so I don't know if they did time themselves or if they didn't, but this person got a lot done in a short period of time. So this is their answer, which is what I mean by they got a lot done. This is like at least 2 pages of writing, probably. Like if you were to handwrite it, it'd probably be like 2 pages of note paper, which is plenty. So some things to mention here. The context here was, again, kind of punted on. This isn't enough for context. The biggest thing with this context, that's the issue, says the Mongolian Empire, the Indian Ocean trade routes began to flourish and developing communication and travel, new technologies being created. Okay, so 1, when is this happening? That's not mentioned. And 2, what the hell does this have to do with women? Nothing's mentioned. So mostly it's the fact that this context isn't told when it's happening, so I don't know what the context is, because you have to tell me what the context is. I need to know what time period we're talking about. And then secondly, and really importantly, none of it has to do with the prompt. So I wouldn't qualify it. Say, although women have been taken out of hierarchy due to sexist historical idea, because women show their true qualities and volunteer to continue the family legacy, they should be more female panelists influenced through Afro-Eurasia. Between the period 1250 and 1450, society has been outlawing women to supposed weakness and lack of knowledge. That case is indirect when reflecting on female leadership in the past. So I read that really fast. That's because this thesis actually isn't very good. It's really well written, but here's the problem. What's the prompt? The prompt is evaluate the extent to which the power and influence of women. Let me actually pull it up specifically because I want to make sure we have it exactly right. Evaluate the extent to which women exercised power and influence within various societies in Afro-Eurasia during this time period. So, within that time period means they don't care about outside that time period, so I wouldn't be saying something like sexist historical idea. It's like, okay, I mean, yeah, there's sexism, it's been around for a long time, but you can't just be like, because of sexism. I don't know. It's like, I wouldn't use that. Between this period, societies have been outlawing women. What do you mean by that? What is outlawing women? Women aren't illegal. Women get to exist. I don't know what that means. But that case is proved incorrect when reflecting on feminine leadership in the past. I don't, because they're not weak and they have knowledge. I mean, yeah, sure, but the argument is just in this specific time period, what happened to the extent of women's power. Now, here's the deal. This person says there should be more feminine power influence throughout Afro-Eurasia. I don't like the word should because, again, this isn't your opinion they're asking for. They're asking for what happened. They don't care about your opinion, which is that, in this case, the opinion is, hopefully, this opinion's true. Women have largely been discriminated against. Women have lots of virtues and should be able to do things and be able to be more powerful. And history sucks because it's been super sexist when it comes to things like that. That's all, sure, that's right. This question isn't asking, is history sexist? The question's asking, okay, to what extent did women's power and influence spread during this time period in these regions? So this tells me it should have spread more, so I can work with it, but this person would not get the thesis point. That's a better written thesis than the previous one. That's a higher quality of writing, I would say. But it doesn't really respond to the prompt very well. Because this is going too much down the rabbit hole of your own personal opinion. They're not really asking your opinion on in a history a history thesis is an argument, yes, and it's your opinion, yes, but it's not like they don't care about your feelings. This isn't feelings based. This is just evidence based. It's you might feel that women, deserve more recognition, which they do, but that's not what the question's really asking about. Okay, so. The idea of a family ruling over empires always existed, even with different cultures in which they disagree. Okay, I mean, yeah, kind of. That's a topic sentence, so it's like the end of the world if they write that. It's always existed, has existed for the majority of history. I probably again always. I don't like that, but whatever. Different cultures in which they disagree with regards to just the family ruler. Should it be democracy? Whatever. Document 1 again. Don't say document 1. Say whatever. Refers to the Mongolian Empire and the daughter-in-law Genghis Khan. She discusses her family and their command within the empire. So this is the thing that was tricky here. She discusses her family. Document 1 is not written by her. It's written by a separate historian. While using her own ideas of religion to faithfully pursue actions towards the Mongolian Empire. So in terms of this person getting the point for summarizing the document properly, because they specifically say that she's the one doing it, that's not accurate. The document is not from her perspective. It's from another person's perspective. It is complimentary of her. It is saying that she did a bang-up job, but not her. Even though she has her own ideas, self-inflicted rules, and personality, she's still part of the family and ready for fate to rule alongside them. I mean, is that true? I guess, but that's not in the document at all. None of that you're pulling from the document. That might be your argument, and that's the thing here, where this is part of this person's argument. Where it's they volunteered to continue the family legacy as part of this person's argument and showing the true qualities. That's all part of their argument. So, with regards to their argument, this might work. With regards to the essay, it doesn't really make sense. Now, here's the deal, though. If you do have an argument in your thesis, and then you do things that support that argument, they can give you the support points. So this person probably would get the point for this line here. even though, and it says even though, it's great, even though that line doesn't really make sense in the context of the actual question, it does make sense, kind of, in the context of their thesis point. So, that's tricky, but welcome to grading DBQs, guys. It's freaking hard. The next part. Becky's purpose for writing. So here's the problem. Becky is Genghis Khan's daughter-in-law, so whoops. How will expectations given a family names apparent because a lot of people believe in her doing a good job. She will prove others wrong to strengthen her. Do not believe. So again, nowhere in that document doesn't say that people don't believe in her. And then nowhere in the document says that she's like widely unpopular. This was an unpopular decision because women were like booed openly in Mongolia. No, that was never said. So that's reading too much into it. That's kind of applying too much of your own personal bias. And this person's not sexist or anything. I'm just saying like this person is saying that like sexism is the bigger reason for why all these problems are happening. It's like, okay, yeah, but nowhere in that document doesn't even mention the idea that like this is a bad idea. So no point for that hip. And this is again why you should hit more than one document. Because if this person just misread the document and was like, oh, I thought Becky was the one writing it. I thought the daughter-in-law was writing it. Oh, crap. That's my bad. It's like, right, that's why you want to hit more than one document, just in case you mess something up. Next document. So this person kind of botched the first document. They got a point that could work for the argument, but that's about it. Document 5. Again, don't say document 5, and say the letter from Joan. Just say in Joan of Arc's letter to the King of England. I mean, her nickname was the Maid the whole time. You guys are reading too much into that Maid thing. Representing her personal power and requesting all British cities that have been conquered be returned to the French rule. That's kind of confusing. All cities the British conquered in France is the idea here. Be returned to French rule, or rather be released upon the kingdom. So that's, be careful with how that gets worded, because that's a bit confusing. Like, I'm interpreting it in a positive way, but the AP exam might not. She threatens to run these people out of the country, and if they refuse, she'll slaughter all of them, being the commander of the French military. Okay, I mean, you know what? Yes, I would give this person, like, it's kind of a bad job because of this. Oh my god, it does it every time. Stop defaulting to that. Because of this line, that's tricky. But, the rest of it made a lot of sense. So I'm like, okay, maybe this misworded that a little bit. Maybe that was just my count that as like a grammar error as opposed to like a not understanding the information error. So possibly the point for describing the document. There's not much background around Joan. I mean, there is, just on the document. But she is a strong advocate and leader. Does say, you can probably infer that from the documents, that's fine. Contesting her power against other superior men in power, sure, like he's a king. She may or may not have brought the position through blood. You don't know, so I wouldn't have even left it in there. Like, I know that I can tell this person doesn't know anything about Joan of Arc, so I wouldn't have made that ignorance very obvious. But she will leave with her family's position fighting Henry VI throughout. Okay, again, this is in support of this argument, and it actually does make sense in that context. Because again, family legacy, true qualities, supposed weakness, lack of knowledge is being rebuffed. So, like, based on their argument, does this work? Yeah, sure. So, like, this person's actually got the argument point, which is weird because their argument is not a good one, but it's fine. Joan's intended audience was the King of England. Yep. Used harsh and controlling vocabulary to show dominance. Yep. And she means business or to justify the control that she has over certain authorities. Yes. There is one other big purpose of the document, which is to tell him to back the hell off. So, this is one of those times where, like, I think this is kind of incomplete hipping. I think this hip is incomplete. Because, like, yeah, and this part's great. Like, the how is always good. If you can pull how, like, how is they doing that hip? Like, okay, how is she talking to the intended audience? What is she trying to do with that? How is she mentioning it? Like, that's great. What else was she saying? You probably get the point here because you just said the intended audience for this letter is the King of England, which that is the intended audience. So, so much more you have to do it. How you would tell that was because it's titled. So, I'd probably give you the point for hip there, but I would have made sure to mention because she wants him to get the hell out. Document 3, Pursuit connects back to the womanhood that's beginning to all ladies. I don't know what the hell that means. Like that line, like, She describes the modest, upright, dignified, etc. qualities of a woman and their influence on the world. Yeah, she does. This second sentence, I think, kind of saves it. Because she does do all of these things, and that kind of summarizes a bit, like, the whole thing. That kind of covers, like, the whole idea. It's a pretty simple document, so it's an easier summary. This doesn't make a lot of sense, but the second sentence is fine. So that's a summary that works. This is a summary that also works. So we've got 2 summaries that work. So they get that point. They're not going to get the 4 document summary point because that first one didn't work. So, but that's a point for that. So we're good on that. She entails that all women should support each other no matter of gender. That I don't know what that means. That didn't come up in there. She mentions different like women from like a age standpoint of like old women versus young women, but that's not different gender. That's just different age. And that women need to rise above and show the strength they were born with. She never mentions that. Women have always had the same power and authority. Then she super doesn't say that. She actually says the opposite. She says specifically, the wife is one who follows her husband. The way of the husband and wife is the principle of the strong and the weak. The strong being the husband, the weak being the wife. So no, that's wrong. That one is factually inaccurate. So that's not right. Now, typically, this is like square peg round hole. This person is trying to use a document that actually goes against their thesis and either isn't recognizing that it goes against their thesis or is trying to force it to apply to their thesis through just sheer, I don't know, lying or misrepresenting the document, but that's not what the document says. So no points on this argument. This is a summary is correct, but the argument doesn't make any sense. The intended audience are the people who felt underpowered and not worthy. At no point does she mention that. She used powerful and expressive words. She does do that. To describe how a woman's nature is different from what she may believe. That does what? How do you know that? In order to convince that women have just as many qualities as men do. I don't. What? I don't know what that is. Now again, this person either misread that document or again is trying to square peg round hole. So there's probably no chance that we're going to get anything in this other than just summarizing the document, which they summarized it right, which is weird. They understood what it said. They just didn't seem to get what it means. It's like, no, she's mostly saying that she might say that women and men have to work together to like have the country function, which is good and that could be useful. This person doesn't mention that. And then she could see, here we go. This person did it this time. They didn't say in document 4. This is Kagetsu drew an image of Tomoe Gozen, a female samurai represents the skill and bravery during the Mongolian expansion. That's wrong. Why? Because it's Japanese. Mongolians never got to Japan. It's the one place they couldn't get to. So, no. Good attempt, but we got to read it. It says Japan. Japan is not a part of Mongolia. So, no on that. Everything else is great, but the Mongolian expansion thing ruins the point. Kagetsu does draw Joseon a very feminine person, but rather capable of holding her own business, not afraid to get her hands dirty. Okay, yeah, like, what's the intent of that? Like, how does that connect back to your thing? She shows them not afraid to get her hands dirty, which indicates that this person viewed women as strong, capable fighters who are equal to men in power. Like, that is what we're looking for. Like, he did it a lot up here, so this person might have run out of time there. Purpose is picturing the fierce, the character is capable and above average person, as well as he is trying to portray a stronger model for women. Yeah, maybe. I mean, above average person, I don't know, it's like soldier, or like at least as a soldier, so that could work. This one, maybe. This point, no. This point, no. So here we go. Let's talk about some points before I get to their evidence outside the documents. So this is a confusing one because they did a bunch of weird stuff. No point for that. That ain't a question. So context, there ain't anything there. Thesis, also no, because it doesn't respond to the prompt. It is workable. You can use it, which is good because it means they don't lose points for like everything else. Like they have an argument. It just doesn't apply to the prompt. We go to the evidence. In the documents, they do this twice. There are 2 examples of the documents having good evidence. It's the second and the third one. So there's 2 of those. The argument, they actually did this a couple of times well. I think they did it like almost 3 times pretty well. So the argument part, we're okay there. And then the 4, they do attempt 4, but they don't get it because they botch document 1 and document 4. Document 1 and document 4 is evidence that like the summary wasn't right. So yeah, no point on that. So you have to summarize and argue right, and they do that for 2, but like bits and pieces of 2, not for 4. So not on the 4. Then you've got evidence beyond the documents, which we'll get into in a second. Hipping, they attempted 4 hips, they got 2, which is why it's good to attempt more hips than you need to. Did get 2 hips. Complexity. No, so right now this person's sitting at 4 points out of 6, out of 10. With evidence beyond documents to be scored. They did attempt it, they have 2, but let's see if they actually make sense and work. So, we've got Marie Antoinette, Queen of France. Okay, this is going to be interesting. One, because Marie Antoinette is like an example of a powerful woman. Yes, an example of a powerful woman where she did mostly bad things. Also, showed her power through rigorous times. I mean, yeah, rigorous times that are brought about by her. Although she was pressed with committing the wrong acts, she did commit the wrong acts. She held herself and others to a respectful and powerful standard. Not really. Queen Antoinette inherited her position through the monarchy. Yeah, technically. Whether it was right decision or not, okay. She fought to keep her power until she could not fight anymore. I mean, yeah, sure. To other people, women were thought of as weak and will cave in at any moment. She did not let up with a fight, staying strong and courageous. Courageous might not be the right word to use there. Through her own thought ideas. Like, be careful here. Marie Antoinette is kind of a villain. Like, when you have starving citizens and you say, let them eat cake. Saying, F the poor, let them starve to death. That's hilarious. That person's not like a good person. So trying to use them to say how women were like strong and courageous is like trying to use Hitler for saying like how charismatic leadership is good. Like, he was a good leader. It's like, and he killed millions of people because of like, racism. So no, I wouldn't use her. This part makes sense. Like, would not let up without a fight. Sure. Did not give up. Sure. Had to be executed to be stopped. Sure. Executed to be stopped because she was doing terrible things. So she's not a great example to use here. Doesn't really support your argument. She's kind of like why women shouldn't have power. Like, someone would use her as an example of why women shouldn't have power. Now, women should have power, yes, but like someone might use Marie Antoinette as like why women couldn't, because she's an example of a failure. Like, I wouldn't, like, that's a bad idea. This other example is very good. During 12th century, Marie de France, amazing poll, you must have Googled that, but respect to you. Poet and translator, highly influential, many educated and uneducated people in Europe, being features women in the lower class. Yep. Marie de France had little room to grow and become successful. Great. In a position, it's not pictured to be a writer, let alone anyone educated. Yeah, because she's a impoverished woman. Upper works came growing in passion, long silence did not give in to the fate society dropped for her. Carved across her own path, personality given by God himself. I mean, like, I wouldn't put this down, but in her opinion, she did. So, like, it's tied to her beliefs. So you can maybe save yourself there if you're the one saying that from, like, your perspective, because, like, God-given gifts and stuff like that. Be clear that, like, the AP exam is not going to be, like, inherently religiously biased in favor of Christianity. In fact, if anything, it's biased against it, because history is written from so many different perspectives of religious beliefs that I wouldn't, like, incorporate your own religious beliefs into any of these. Because, again, these aren't personal essays. These are historical essays. In English class, maybe you get to put more of your own, like, personal spin on stuff. This is written a lot like an English essay, which is why there's some problems there. Where it's like, this is too much about you. It needs to be more about history. Now, I would still count this Marie de France thing as good evidence beyond the documents. She works. That's a good evidence beyond the documents. So this person would have gotten, like the previous one, 5 points. The other one was much shorter and was, frankly, more poorly written. Like, from an English score standpoint, the other person did a much worse job from, like, quality of writing standpoint. This person did a much better job from quality of writing standpoint. They got the same amount of points because context didn't get a point for because they didn't make it relevant. The thesis was about the wrong thing. Misinterpreted a couple of documents. Had they interpreted all the documents correctly, they actually have enough stuff here to possibly get the 4 point, which is crazy because they did a good enough job arguing a lot that they could have actually got the point there. And a couple of times the argument didn't make sense because, again, this one, like, it works based on yours, it works based on yours. Does it work based on the actual idea? No, but, based on your argument, it makes sense. The Marie Antoinette's kind of a bad idea to use here. It's the person that you do know, so, like, it's cool, but, you be careful. And also try to embed these. Like, if you're going to use Marie Antoinette, you probably want to use her with other leaders, so either Becky or Empress Zhu. If you wanted to use Marie de France, she doesn't really fit into any of the other, like, spots that these documents fill out, so she could just be put wherever. But, yeah, 5 points there. Not terrible. Okay, so that's plenty. Because, frankly, that took a long time. Because I wanted to explain the whole thought process and how I would have written it myself and stuff like that. So there's only 2 of the DBQs. They both got scored 5s, but for entirely different reasons. A lot of people did decent jobs on these. No one did, like, crazy good. Didn't expect that to happen. 45 minutes is not a lot of time. But on this upcoming week's one, please, please, please time yourself. 45 minutes. Make sure that you give yourself 45 minutes for it. You can do an outline beforehand. Only give yourself max 15 minutes for that outline. Do not give yourself much time for that. So on the AP exam this year, it's 45 minutes to write the whole DBQ. That's it. And that's like You get to open the thing, read the prompt and the documents, and write the DBQ in that 45 minutes. So like we still haven't even gotten to that point of practicing it. We're still giving you 15 minutes of reading time. So that ain't happening on the exam. You got to be very careful about that. When you're reading these, one, make sure that you read it properly. You got to be very careful. Like read it carefully. When you're writing it, don't write in document 1 and document 2. Write what the document is. Try to limit yourself to 3 documents. That way you're not going to crush yourself on time, and go for as many of the attainable points as possible. If you're terrible at context, then probably don't go for context. You have to go for thesis, because if you don't go for thesis, you don't have an argument, so most other points won't make any sense. Like if it says there's evidence that's tied to your argument and you don't have an argument, then there's no way you can get that point, regardless of what your evidence is. So be very careful with all of that stuff. That all being said, there's still a lot of positives here. I mean, the 2 that I went over, the only problem with the first one was that I think the quality of writing was not amazing, but they still got points for a lot of stuff. They got a lot of points for a lot of things. Could have done better on their arguments a couple of times. They could have done better on hipping a couple of times. They could have done more documents, and they didn't do any evidence beyond the documents that worked. So there was plenty of places where they could easily improve. The one that I just did, really, if that person had answered the document properly, like had responded properly with their thesis, there would have been a lot more points they could have gotten. And again, still 5 out of 10 is pretty good. In my opinion, a 5 out of 10 will probably be at the threshold to, if not pass, get a 4 this year. Because, again, I don't think people are going to be getting 10 points here. I don't think that's so much less realistic than normal. Like 9 and 10 points on this is going to be so freaking hard. I think the average super high score would be like a 7. So if you can get yourself to, by the time we do the AP exam, which is in about 3 weeks from Thursday, if you can by that point get yourself to like 7 points on one of these, that'd be pretty good. Again, if you want me to go over yours specifically next week, or if you want me to go over yours from this week and just look at it really quickly and score it, email me, let me know. Let me know if you want that. I can do it, it's just a matter of time, because I spend a lot of time during the week on econ stuff. I can't spend a ton of time on WAP. But Monday, after I grade everything, which I grade everything Monday morning, after that I can do a lot of stuff for WAP. So probably next week around the same time I'm going to be doing this same kind of video. If you want me to go over yours specifically, just email me, let me know. I'll go over yours specifically in the video. I won't tell anybody it's yours, so you don't have to worry about them judging you, but I can help out. Cool. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know Casey and Gio, you guys are able to stop by. If you're watching this after the fact, please let me know if you liked it, if there's anything you want me to throw in there next time. Of course, it's a long video. It was going to be long. It was going to be me explaining a full thing and talking about a lot of stuff, so it was going to be a long video. If you've got the time to watch this whole thing, thank you so much for watching the whole thing. I really do appreciate it, you guys. And feel free to email me and ask me questions when you've got stuff. I'll help you guys out best I can. I want to make sure you guys succeed on the AP exam and aren't like negatively impacted by this whole remote learning thing. I want you guys to have a good shot. So please let me know if I can do anything differently. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Let me make sure that I'm doing a good job on my video and everything looks okay on this end. All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a good weekend. Well, not weekend. Week. Yeah, sorry. I'm used to doing these things on like Thursday and Friday. Thanks for having hope you guys have a good week. Best of luck.